Good afternoon. I'm Sherry Hennessy, BioNJ's Senior VP of Member Engagement and Strategic Partnerships. Thank you for joining us for Stop Spelunking in Health Authority Websites Using AI for Better Combo Product Intelligence, brought to you in partnership with BioNJ member Rhizome AI. Today's timely webinar will explore how AI is helping life sciences organizations streamline regulatory strategy and make more confident data-driven decisions. As regulatory expectations continue to evolve and the volume and complexity of data grows, organizations are looking for smarter, more efficient ways to navigate submissions, strengthen risk management, improve human factors studies, and enhance post-market surveillance. During today's discussion, you'll gain practical insights and real-world strategies designed to help you reduce complexity, save time, and unlock deeper, more actionable intelligence across the product lifecycle. We're delighted to have you with us and look forward to an engaging and informative conversation. We will be leaving time at the end for audience questions. Please type your questions for our panelists in the Q&A box. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up after the program. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available on BioNJ's website. Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce and hand the mic over to today's speakers, CEO of Rhizome AI, Chetan Mishra, and founder and principal engineer for Hosty Consulting, Shannon Hosty. Welcome, Chetan and Shannon.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Chet, I think you're on mute.
I was indeed. I'm no longer on mute. Thank you. Thank you for the intro, Sherry. Hi all. My name's Chetan. Let me quickly share my screen and we'll jump in. Maybe to start off, obviously title of the talk is how we could use AI better for this conversation will be focused on combination products, but I think a lot of the lessons that Shannon and I discussed will apply to all kinds of other therapeutics and life sciences as well. So looking forward to engaging in the discussion. It's a bit of an outline for what we'll cover in the next 30 minutes. First, how could you have better, almost real-time regulatory strategies with AI and ensure you're always putting your best foot forward? Second, how it has changed the way Shannon runs her own business and the different types of clients that Hosty Consulting is interacting with. We'll also go over what AI tools we wouldn't use or what kinds of use cases we wouldn't use them for, and why risk management may be even more so than regulatory really needs to adopt AI. And at the end, there'll be a thank you attendance gift to everyone on the call. So looking forward to you all. So for those that stay on to the end, that'll get shouted out. But with that, Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Chetan. So I'm Shannon Hosty, and I've been in combo products before it was combo products, but my background's I'm a med device girl. So I worked in insulin injectors and auto injectors back in the 90s, late 90s, and have had a chance to work in various companies on the medical device and combination product front. I was at Intel Digital Health and then Stryker, and then I had the opportunity to join the FDA. My deep dive is in human factors engineering, so I was able to lead the human factors team in CDRH and then work over in CEDAR. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we're talking, because that perspective is some of mine as I think about how I use AI. But since then, I've come back and I'm working as a consultant. I've worked with Illumina and several startups and ran a CRO, but now I'm independent and working in human factors and risk management. So it's been a journey. How about you, Jason?
So my background a bit different from you, Shannon. Most of the folks on the call, software engineer, started off my career in like an AI research team. Last couple jobs helped build an AI platform for protein engineers, and before that helped banks and mortgage companies with a lot of document processing and types of like problems and obstacles. And so decided I liked different parts of those two jobs, pushed them together, and then founded Rhizome about 2 years ago now. We help life sciences know what their regulator thinks. They type in a question, they get an answer. It's an answer that will cite up to 1,000 references. So it'll be really, really comprehensive. And it's an answer that's not going to have hallucinations because each fact we rely on is traced back to some original source in one of the authoritative databases that the industry trusts. But
Anybody
main
listening, don't worry, I'll push him on that later.
and so yeah, that's just a bit about us. First customer was about a year and a half ago now for Rhizome, and we now have more than 25 different orgs that benefit from our products. But with that
Awesome.
intro, we'll jump right in and maybe start with a bit of a softball. How are we using AI today in and out of work? And we'll go into in work a bit more detail in subsequent slides. But just in general, Shannon, I'll let you start and some specific flavors, any industry specific tools we're using. How do we decide what to offload to AI? And when do we consider programming versus AI-based automation just at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be interested to hear kind of, I'll share how I use that. I'll be interested to hear how you do. I feel like the tech outsider, at least with regards to the tech of AI. So I use quite a few tools. Actually, it was as we thought through these questions, I had to actually step back and think about all the tools that I use that have AI that I don't even think about anymore necessarily as AI. But uh, for personal use and light work, I use like a Google Gemini. I like Google Gemini because it just it's a good chat bot. It communicates in a way that I like to communicate. Uses a Socratic method in response, and don't use ChatGPT or Copilot. I haven't um, had a good interaction with those, but Gemini seems to help me on those fronts. But for more technical, I'll use Claude for coding, like R or Python. I do qualitative and quantitative research. Um, I actually dove into the rabbit hole of using Claude for business materials as well. So that's been quite fun. Generating landing pages for courses that I've been thinking about for years, and um, finally now have some quick collateral to get that done. And then research tools, Licit, Google Scholar, Research Rabbit, Notebook, for that whole research process. And then some graphic development things, like with Adobe, the Adobe suite. So quite a bit actually. When I stepped back and thought about it, I was surprised actually. And Rhizome as an industry specific deep dive. And so each one has a different use and purpose. So it's good to have a toolbox. How about you?
Agree. I think generalist wise, I typically go to Claude for just general conversations and like vacation planning or most things outside of work, real estate stuff. For industry and for coding as well, the Claude models tend to be quite good. Sometimes if I want viewpoints on something that's a tricky question, I will just go and open 5 different chatbots and that's all the same thing and go through a parallel conversation. Like we just launched a redesign and we had to think a little bit about what should be in scope and out of scope there. And so that kind of like council of AI things was somewhat helpful there. I think AI doesn't have the most original ideas, and so you have to temper how much you actually listen to them. But it's often worth listening. I often find it helpful to make sure I'm not missing something obvious that should be caught. Um, and then how do I decide what kinds of work AI should do? Really, I focus on what are things that are easy for me to verify. Like I find if the cost of verification is almost as severe as just doing the work myself, or even if it's only a 20-30% saving, I'll just do it myself. It's not very fun reading giant blobs of text all the time. Like it's kind of fun sometimes to write stuff yourself and to go do the thing yourself and instead of just testing and checking. And so that powers a lot of it, a lot of how I decide that gap. And then I find myself like if I can program a solution and automation, I will go do that. But there are cases where like you can't program a solution, and that's where where I lean into AI. Like one use case that we recently rolled out is for our Rhizome AI. If there's logs coming in from just like the servers running, And if we use AI to help us analyze is there something anomalous happening? Is something down? Is there something that's taking longer than it should? Is our processing times like just off in some way? And so for those, I really like everyone talks about AI, but old school programming works a lot better if you can use it for your specific automation. And so that's how I still try to draw the line there. What about you, Shannon?
Absolutely. I think there's always something to be said for just good digital hygiene. So making sure when you're using AI that you're using it smart and understand uh, any permissions or privacy concerns that you might have with different tools and using them appropriately. I think one actually real quick on it was Google Gemini use I had a few weeks ago. I don't know if you remember when Microsoft went down, particularly for Teams, like across the country. I don't remember what
Mm,
exactly happened, but it
yeah.
wasn't working right. And I realized I hadn't gotten an email in like 3 hours, which is odd. And so I jumped on Gemini and asked Gemini what might be happening, and it reported the outage. And then it actually prompted and said, hey, I can give you an update every hour about when things are coming back online and what regions are online. It's like, great. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
exactly what I would want from a teammate sitting next to me that could jump in on IT questions.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, Quick example question, me travel planning with Claude. I feel like at some point,
Oof.
I'm sure most people on this call have done some version of this, but if you haven't, it's quite good. Only tip I would give is don't ask it for what you should do. Ask it for what like the second or third most popular thing is that you should do. Otherwise, it will just send you to the most tourist packed areas possible in whatever destination you might be visiting.
Oh,
Um,
that sounds fun. Now I want to plan a vacation.
Um, how has AI and so like Shannon, your background, as you mentioned early on, is in a variety of different things, but you particularly specialized in the human factor side of things. Hosty Consulting doesn't just focus on human factors, though, right? My understanding is you offer a lot of other services as well to the companies that you work with. So
Yeah,
I'm curious,
yeah.
like, what are those buckets? How has it changed the way you offer just all of your services? How's it changed who you interact with and engage with? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So human factors is an interesting field because it's throughout the product development process, but it's lockstep with risk management and product development. And so as you're working in human factors, you're often also, bridging out into design control questions or risk management. And so kind of covering that space. But and definitely the other piece is the regulatory perspective. Not only with just human factors in general, because it was largely to date being pushed by pre-market review, so from the regulators, but also personally having been a regulator on that side, come in with that lens as well. Um, so it has definitely changed the way I interact and what I have seen with AI and why I'm so excited about it. And this is evolving, just within the last few months, this has evolved quite a bit. Um, but being able to basically see the real, almost near real time landscape, regulatory landscape of what's happening in product approvals, what's happening in post market complaints, what's happening in the clinical space, having access to that kind of at your fingertips um, really helps me and I think anybody that's using it this way from a research standpoint quickly get to the heart of the matter, get the viewpoint of the different perspectives and the different way things are playing out, so that you can then take that and synthesize it and provide that input back to someone, a client or a team member as you're working on it. I think it's what we've always wanted. It's what we've always intended to do, right? To have that when we're doing risk management, we want to know what all the use problems are, about the product problems that are out there. When we're doing regulatory, we want to know, what is the FDA thinking, right? Or what are the regulatory bodies thinking? And we would do that work, but it would be the opposite of what we would ideal be is if I set aside, I don't know, 20 hours to do some research, I would spend 19 hours getting materials together. If I'm looking up specifically how human factors is being evaluated for injection time, injection force on a combination product. Um, I'd be going out identifying what products have been approved recently and then digging into those files and the human
Yeah.
factors data is in the other file. So I'd be pulling up the other file, quote unquote other file, and then diving down into that. So it's been 19 hours getting it together, and then I'd have a few hours left, maybe, to kind of assimilate it and put together in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
AI flips that, right? So AI, I can quickly, and this is an example output here from a question. I think this was about yeah,
Injection
injection
times.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so with a tool like Rhizome, it's quickly pulling from that public database or from the public data that's out there, um, the same information that I was going out and trying to find. And so I can in a matter of a few minutes, and I usually go through a few prompt questions. So putting that together within 10, 15 minutes, I can have a body of knowledge that I can then start to synthesize rather than spending 20 hours doing that. I can now do that in 3 or 4 hours, because I can get all the materials together and then spend my time on the strategy and the creative part of understanding that information, which is
Yeah.
where as humans we excel. So, um, and real quick, as I think about when you think about the tools you use, I like to think about AI as a team member. So if I'm thinking about what tool I want to use that is an AI tool, I try to think about it at the same level that I would think if I wanted to hire someone, right, to be a team member.
Hmm.
So what am I expecting this? What am I expecting? What do I need them to do? Um, how would I like them to communicate? What level of confidence do I need to have in their answers? Um, how much work do I need to do after they do their work? Right, all of these questions. It's the
Yeah.
same. Um, and so as you're looking at the output of the different tools, you can kind of see if that addresses your needs. And one real
Yeah.
quick thing here in this example is, and I like how this is broken down, and I know some tools do this better than others, and but I really like on how Ryzen breaks it down. But uh, and so it provides kind of an overview of the feedback, and then it provides a detailed review uh, along with examples, and then it provides like a list of records that were evaluated. So depending on where I want to go in with this, if this is a space I know really well, I don't necessarily need the overview, but I want to dive into the details. So I can go straight to the details. If I'm coming
Yeah.
in and I'm asking a question that's a little bit more of a tangential area and I just want to get a gut check, I can start with the synthesis. And so again, it's thinking about what do you need out of that team member that, that you're bringing on.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think for those in the audience, obviously Shannon is a customer, she uses Rhizome, but like maybe you have some other tool that the company's already paid for that you have access to. I
Mhm.
think the points though that Shannon made on like it should be something that lets you easily verify those answers, and provides you that traceability, and it should be something that can be high level but also can let you go into the details without just dumping 20 pages of text on you. Like
Yeah,
I think there's others who also go do this. I think we do it the
sure.
best, but there's others who go do this as well. But the value of this research in a post AI world is higher because it's pretty easy to get at, and it can often surprise folks, even folks who've been in the industry for a while. I mean, I remember talking to lots of folks who had no idea pre-IND meetings had their summaries disclosed once the products are approved.
Mhm.
And suddenly, like that's a whole new, and they bumped into it because they were just asking different questions to Rhizome, and we were able to dig that up. And so there is, in the past, it might have not been worth it because it was just the assumption that you have to put 20 hours of work in to get some amount of research out. But now that it's 10 minutes of work in to get some amount of research out, I think that calculus on how frequently we should go out and pull from this body of knowledge has shifted.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I know I was in industry for about 20 years before I went to the FDA. And working as a regulator in HF specifically, you work across all products. And so you have a really good idea of the different things that are happening and access to a lot of information to make sense of things. And I had realized, stepping in, I remember sitting there thinking, my gosh, I wish I had access to this level of information, not as like trade secreting, but but as an understanding how to navigate the landscape and get products, make safer products faster. So so then having left the FDA, right? You no longer have access to that information, although some of it's now public and you actually know it's there,
Yeah.
like the reviews. Um, but again, accessing it was difficult until AI kind of opened that door for us.
Yeah. Agreed. Um, Risk management. I'm curious, how has that shifted in a pre and post AI world? How has that shifted the like top bottoms up versus top down discussion? How maybe does it shift post market surveillance?
Yeah, that's actually dovetails well into what we were just talking about because
Yeah.
risk management, we've I'm thinking of it from the 14971 perspective, but the logic is the same for pharmaceuticals and med device. But when you first start your risk management file, you want to understand what are all of the existing problems that are out there, right? And so you can pretty easily typically search your internal complaint database and understand what's happening on your products. That's Many of the GXP systems now have AI tools that can help with that too on your internal
Mhm.
data. Um, but that external data was always hit or miss, right? You could go to a mod and you have a whole bunch of pretty cryptic feedback on failure modes. You go to fairs, which is really more population level public health type data, so it doesn't tell you a whole lot for your product. Um, and you can kind of dig through some of those databases, but it's difficult, cumbersome, and you may not get the return. So the level that you do is probably minimal. Again, now we have access to tools that can help us get through that data and we can do meaningful known use problems. So both for product risk
Yeah.
management, understanding what potential hazards might come out of my product or what failure modes are being seen in the field. Um,
Yeah. And
I
maybe
moved
if
it,
I like,
yeah,
I was just going to jump in with a little like devil's advocate of the FDA's accepted the old way of doing this, and like people have gotten approval and people have stayed on the market, right? Like, what is the pressure to necessarily change when there's so many different things to do on any kind of device or drug development program?
yeah. Well, here's my opinion on this.
Yeah,
And my opinion is we don't design products for the regulatory agencies, right?
yeah,
They're the bar we need to pass to get to market. But when we're designing products, we're designing them for the patients. And so when we have methods that actually it can increase the speed that we move, and help us to go a little bit deeper on the scientific rigor of what we're doing. It's a win-win. Although it is something new, it's probably a new investment in tools and things like that. Um, but the other way I think of that is anything we're doing up front is so if I'm investigating what are my known use problems and I'm doing that up front and designing that in my product, that same research is going to happen whether I do it or whether I put the product on the market and I let my customers do it and
mm,
do it through my complaint process. So that's going to be a lot more expensive than adding some of that rigor up front. So that's kind of my take on it. But it's always a when we're successful and we're running, why do we need to do something different? It's always a battle. It's human nature.
yeah. Do you think as the FDA realizes some of this is now easier, like are they likely to have like change where the bar is, right? Like on a statutory basis, maybe that's not kosher, but practically speaking, yeah,
Yeah. I don't I, I think where it might come in is if there are solutions that are identified that it tends to be the whole regulatory environment tends to be a response, a stimulus response type of
fair, yeah,
exercise,
yeah,
right? Something bad happens, or they're alerted of something, and then they're investigating ways to manage that, right? And if there, as tools evolve, if there's new ways of addressing issues that are coming out, I think regulatory science evolves um, as we go. But um, but I think in my experience, and I know people have different feelings about their regulators, but in my experience, having stepped from industry into that space, it was just an amazing group of folks, all working towards that same public health mission, and all trying to actually, move safe products forward. So I think when it comes down to it, it's always a balance between industry and regulators, and identifying the best path forward.
No, that
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. And expanding past risk management, how do you sort of see post-market surveillance being adjusted, being changed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's essential for post-market surveillance. And I think so we saw updates in ISO 14971 and EU MDR, IVDR on active post-market surveillance expectations. We have clinical expectations in Europe and Australia. And it's interesting because when that came out, I'm like, oh, that's great. How's it going to happen? Right?
Yeah.
It was 2019-ish. Um, but I think this gives us that tool. I mean, you mentioned earlier using uh, using AI to kind of detect patterns for in the software world. It can be the same in the post-market world, right? So you can be looking at literature, you can be looking at clinical studies, other products coming on the market, and actually
Yeah.
meaningfully aggregate that info to
Yeah.
make it usable. So it's
And I have a
exciting.
lot of startups who I talk to who talk about like, look, this is the bar, that the spirit of some of the topics and what we wish we could do.
Hmm.
And then this is what we're actually able to do. Like, well, once a year, someone goes and manually curates a bunch of stuff, or once every other year, we do blah, 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 or we just pay someone else 30K, 50K, and they come out with something, and we send the
Hmm.
regulator that something. I do think it's good to change. I think, like to your point, engineers, orgs would like it to not be a checkbox exercise, but it just
Yeah.
was prohibitive. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
pleasantly exciting that it might not be as prohibitive to have it be more than a checkbox exercise going forward.
Yeah. Agreed. And
Um,
I think one of the biggest
yeah.
challenges we face is on the validation side, particularly for GXP systems. Um, and this gets back to my earlier conversation about AI and thinking of AI as a team member,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
as I'm bringing AI into my GXP systems, what role am I having that do? I was just talking to Andy O'Connor from ERA Sciences about that teaming concept, and um, and he works in the GXP validation space, and he was talking about there was a tool he was looking at, and it generated an output, and it was fabulous. It looked like this great output, and then as he read deeper, it started to fall apart a little bit. And his term was it had all
Yeah.
of the right quality candy sprinkled throughout it, but when you looked at it in detail, you were getting either things were being pulled together that didn't make sense to be pulled together, or potentially hallucinations, depending on the model being used. Um, and so when we think about validating systems, we really need to think about the people operating that system, what they're using it for, and then the AI tool itself and how it operates. Um, and so I think that's going to be a challenge as we're looking at more and more of these tools. We can't just lump them into there's a human in the loop. They'll take care of all the risks because that's
Yeah.
not how we work, right? That's not a good team. I'm not going to go hire someone and have them be responsible for everything. Um, they do everything, but I'm responsible for them, right? That just isn't gonna work. So I think that's going to be a challenge coming up.
Agreed.
Working through.
It'll be a bit of a unique thing to
Yeah,
figure out.
yeah.
Um,
It's not my problem per se, which I love because I work more on the research side. So I'm pulling in information
yes.
um, to inform and not using it directly towards product decisions, but yeah.
No, no, it's something we need to figure out as an industry, and definitely
Mhm.
I'll have to think about as we go and interact with a lot of those teams.
Yeah.
One last example of just different AI tools for hazard identification. I'm sure most folks have plugged in these batch of questions into the rhizomes, or sorry, into the ChatGPTs and Claudes, give you pretty good answers. Industry specific tools can often tie it to databases you know and trust, and just go a bit deeper in that level of nuance that
Yeah.
they will return to you.
Yeah.
And here we
Well,
plugged
and
in. Oh, go ahead, Shannon.
that gets right back to the validation question, right? So
Yeah,
if I'm pulling this up, um, and I can, in theory, 100% verify everything that's here on this output or other outputs that have the right level of transparency, right? I can dive in and see where that data came from, so I can verify that data. If I don't have that transparency, that's when I need to have that tool validated. So
agreed, agreed.
yeah,
And the benefit of like industry specific products, they'll tie it to they know you have that expectation, and so they'll do a lot more of that traceability management for you, or they should at least.
Mhm.
Versus on the right hand side, you can see ChatGPT linking to a bunch of Springer articles, and so you'll get booted over to that article, and then you have to sort of figure out where in that page the specific citation might lie.
Mm.
And that is also something that's going to take a good chunk of time and often be similar to just skimming it yourself or hitting Control F and searching for sentences yourself.
Okay.
And so just one bit of a final example there. I will maybe one last tidbit. I promised a bit of a thank you for folks who stayed on past the talk. Rhizome, we are actually as of this morning, we are launching a free tier on our product. And so for folks that go to rhizomeai.com and log on, and if you do so today, you're on this webinar, I can bump you up to paid access for the next 4 weeks, just so you can try one of the industry specific tools. There are many other ones out there. And so folks doing regulatory research, clinical research, competitive intel, risk analysis, we find our customers tackling all kinds of different use cases. So feel free to come on rhizomeai.com. If you were on this webinar, we'll bump you up to paid access for the next 4 weeks. And with that, let's switch over to questions.
So I have a
Thank you.
question as we get going on that real quick. You had mentioned about the no hallucinations. So I know
Yes.
with Gemini, I've run into hallucinations, especially on sources. How do you prevent that in
Yes.
Rhizome, or
It's
how do
Yeah,
tools
it's a good question.
use that?
The specific thing we do is we have a fine-tuned subagent that only relies on primary source data for like factual assertions and factual statements that it makes, and it'll tie what it says to a specific page of this like first-party source data. It would never make sense for Claude or Gemini or other products to do this because it makes it run a lot slower. Instead of an answer coming back in half a second, it's going to come back in like 5 seconds. But we know for our audience that is the trade-off more than worth making.
Yeah.
And so that is on like a mechanical level. There's a lot of other stuff we do as well, but that is the single strongest differentiator. And like hallucinations are always hypothetically possible, but we've had regulatory affairs professionals using our product for 18 months now. They are a tough crowd to please, but they've been pretty happy with it. And then obviously, Shannon, you're quite discerning as well, being a former reviewer at the FDA. And folks have been quite happy with the results of our technical approach.
That makes sense.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for the offer for our audience. That's fabulous. We do have a question from the audience. Do you have any recommendations for good AI safety if dealing in sensitive information?
Interesting. I guess it depends a little. I can take that first, Shannon. It depends a little bit on what kind of safety we're talking about. If we're talking about data like privacy and potentially like prompts leaking and questions and answers leaking, the I think that's where like pulling in IT and making sure they have a conversation with these provide with whatever kind of tool you might be using is most helpful. If you can't get them on a call to talk to, I would just recommend a phone call in a lot of these cases. That just tends to be a lot more productive between IT and whoever that external software provider might be. If you can't get that external software provider on the call, that's probably a bit of a red flag. You should be able to, but there are like SOC 2 and sort of through technology architecture, there's standard ways you can ensure that your data is not being used for training purposes. It's not potentially leaking to other people who might be using the same software product. And there's sort of a data firewall set up in between different users. The other comment I would make from AI safety is if you can't, like, let's say you can't, or you just have to use something today, just be careful about what you plug in. If you're typing in stuff that you Google anyways, it's not like IT is talking to Google, like, right? Like that's probably anonymize things, make it less minimally confidential. If you're, and I have a lot of startup customers that really like, they want to be able to put in, here's what we're thinking in terms of our pre-sub, and here's our medical device and how it works, or here's our drug and how it works. And so what feedback do you have? Like those kinds of questions, obviously super sensitive. You want to go probably have NDAs in place and probably make sure the technology architecture of the company on the other side is pretty solid.
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, back just like if you were hiring someone, you'd want to check their background. Are they who they say they are, right? Are they going to sign an NDA? And I also think so. It depends again on how you're using the information. I think thinking back on that, the human teaming, right? So the best use AI is going to be good at looking for signals. It's going to be good at going through a large volume of information and pulling together important things for you to review. I think when you're coming into AI with a problem to solve, that can be tricky. Um, but if you're coming into AI to help you solve a problem, then you can ask and get information from a lot of the tools that aren't sensitive information, right? It could be, it's general, it's scientific information, right? Or regulatory or policy information. Um, and you're using the tool to bring together that information so that you can assess that submission or you can assess that strategy or product requirements and so forth. So that kind of come back to good digital hygiene, right?
Okay, thank you both. Another question from the audience actually starts out thanking you for the gift. It says, as AI continues, implementation continues to grow in the biotech space, how would you recommend improving our AI skills, in quotes? Are there tools out there you'd recommend specific to the industry we could explore to develop skills?
Yeah. Interesting. I can jump in here, at least from my customers who I've seen, like who often, some of them are very AI adept and others are like, look, I occasionally use Copilots, but like very rarely and only that in my emails. They kind of go the full spectrum. I find if the tool is built well, you shouldn't like there shouldn't really be that much in terms of AI specific skills that you need to learn. Instead, it should be more like a coworker that's a specialist at a specific kind of work. And you're really just learning what kind of work can I rely on this coworker for. And that is the main adjustment. And there's no way to learn that other than just use that thing a whole bunch. And like especially in the early days, try to verify different bits of it and learn the quirks of the product, whatever product it might be. But the like I don't think there's a good way to yeah, I would say just use more of the tools generally in your day to day. The second thing though that comes to mind is I think it's an accelerant for whatever else you might be doing. So if you're learning about how cell and gene therapy like CMC works, I think AI like the AI is most helpful there in helping you go down that journey and helping you understand the science and understand the research and understand which companies are doing interesting things in that space. And so I actually think it's most powerful accelerating whatever other learning you might already be doing, and that also give you good intuition for how to take advantage of it once you're on the workforce. I think one challenge with companies with like just larger orgs is you don't necessarily control the AI tools you do use versus you do as a consumer. And so there, that level of it's often worth going and using the thing you like, but also using the thing you might have to use at work, just to cover those bases. Jen?
Um, I lost my train of thought.
It happens. Do you want me to read the question again? Should we go on to another one?
Yeah. Oh, no. So here's my question. And this is a question, I guess, to the folks on the call or any folks that might be listening to this. And that is I've been digging into the human AI teaming space and looking at the potential risks that are unique to AI. And as I've been doing that research, I've been learning a lot more about how AI works, how an LLM works, or the different levels of AI and what controls how does it process information? How does it generate outputs? And that logic of understanding how that tool works really helps you know how to interact with it, right? And I just wonder if I don't know if there's any good classes out there for that, short of just sitting down and digging in, but I wonder if that might be something of interest to folks. I don't know, collaborate with BioNJ and put on put together a class or something to share with folks. But if that might be something of interest, because I think of it again back to the human. If I'm hiring a coworker, I know their background. I understand essentially how they're going to work as I get to know them. I know that better. I know how they're going to process information, when they're going to call my attention to things, and when they may not, right? Because everyone behaves differently. Um, but with an AI tool, it's not responding in the same way that a human would. It's not processing information in the same way. Um, so the better I can understand that, the better I know when I'm operating at the boundaries and when I should question or you know, verify information that I'm getting back. So I guess I'm saying that more as a question of, is that something that y'all think would be helpful to folks or not? Or do you need to go into that level of detail? Do I need to know how the engine works to drive the car? I don't know. What do you think, Jaden?
I often explain during onboarding calls and in our official support documentation how the product works. I agree with you. I think it helps the intuition behind it,
Mhm,
especially like Shannon, you know, like program for others who like have some of that background and some of that experience. I think it's
mhm,
quite helpful. But I find it's not strictly necessary. Like there's a lot of our
yeah,
customers who just hopped on, randomly found it, interacted with the Rhizome, and then they're having a good time with it. And I meet lots of like other folks not in life sciences,
mhm,
just my friend circle who are fully non-technical and no kind of scientific background, but they've just picked up, okay, this is how I interact with this
mhm,
AI
yeah,
buddy. And so not strictly necessary, definitely helpful, especially for folks who come from that technical background.
yeah.
Another question from the audience. How is your tool better than using ChatGPT or Claude for research?
Yeah. So for Rhizome specifically, and the answer here, there's a lot of different industry specific AI tools that focus on research. But for us specifically, there's two things we do better. We don't have hallucinations, primarily because we don't rely on that like memory that ChatGPT and Claude tend to quite a bit. And we're not going to give you an answer off of N of 10 or like a sample size of 2 or a sample size of 5. We will go and dig through dozens or hundreds or even thousands, if there are thousands, of clinical trials, devices, drugs, data points that might be relevant. And so that is, or those are really the key differentiators. Shannon, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think another key point is the data set that's being used.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a chat GPT or a Claude, there's regulatory data out there, but then there's also, how I helped my son when he sprained his knee. How do I, and all everything in between. And it's trying to pull information from this huge data source, but with a specialized tool that can be different. Yeah, it can be focused
And
in on.
one last little tidbit, the citations map to a specific page. So we make it really easy to verify. You click the citation, you go to page 467 of a 1,500 page clinical review, and the fact that the AI claimed is sort of right there.
It does. I literally wanted to cry when I first used the tool. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So,
That's great. Okay, next question. For AI in life sciences, what productivity gains we can expect and in what areas?
Yeah. An interesting question, Shannon. Do you want to take
yeah,
this one first?
sure, sure. I think so, like any other tool, depending on how we implement it, it can be a gain or it could be a drain. And so what we want to do is find where the AI is complementing the work that's being done. So areas where you're going off and you're doing research on large amounts of data, it's great. Areas where you're pulling together and looking for patterns and complaint files, that's great. That's something humans we struggle with, but the AI can do really well. Pulling that together and asking for a creative uh, compilation of that data and determination of potential solutions. It can provide some insights as to things that are there and captured, but it's that human creativity that's really pulling those things together. So kind of using and taking and using the skills of the tools that we have and the people that we have, when we can use that together, that I think that's where we get the gains, in my opinion. But that's
Maybe the bit I would add there is I think today it can do a lot of what you'd expect someone a year or two out of school to be able to do. And I think over time, the number of years there will probably go up. There's two limiting factors though that I see, and I'm giving more of a technology blended answer here. The first limiting factor I see is humans are still much better at like remembering something in the past. Like in technical terms, are like sparse attention is far better than these machines, and so that's why when you start new sessions, they often they remember nothing, and you have to remind them of, oh, I'm working on X, Y, and Z, and that will continue to be a place where like humans have to give the right background context for a specific unit of AI to go do a specific unit of work for you. The other thing that I see uniquely in life sciences as a limiting factor is you all have a lot of data in different kinds of internal systems for those of you who are not Shannon at a much larger company. And getting your AI to be able to interface with those things is massively difficult. And this is something that we're also helping some of our customers with is in addition to bringing in these public domains, and there's other providers for this as well and other folks who can help you with this, but how can you have AI really retrieve and search effectively across all of your other pieces of software so that it has access to the same, it can go pull the same bits of information that people can. That I find is the primary reason why people are generally quite unhappy with their Copilot rollouts. Like even if it itself is quite magical, they'll ask it some question that relates to a document in their QMS and they know it's in there. And it just sort of responds saying, sorry, I couldn't find anything. And it's because that QMS, specifically it's search. This QMS does not have good search capabilities built into it. You need something else to pull that out and give the AI the ability to search that QMS effectively. That's that part of how we built Rhizome is doing that over all this public data, but you need someone to go do that infrastructure work internally, even at smaller biotechs, but definitely at the larger orgs to be able to really help AI do everything you would expect someone a couple of years out of school to be able to do.
Mhm.
Okay, next question. I think you answered this a little bit, but is more specific, I guess. What are your favorite AI tools that are really making a difference in life sciences?
I've been seeing more, and again, I am independent, but I see this with clients that I've worked with and clients in the past of the AI tools that are built into some of our GXP systems for complaint analysis, complaints or identifying, like you were just mentioning, once they're integrated, being able to evaluate through those systems. But
I think from my end, they're like I really obviously in terms of favorite tools, published literature and the ability to go through it to find compelling information. There's a lot of interesting tools for like Elicit. You mentioned Shannon. It's also something I use from time to time just because they do a very good job scouring a lot of that. And there's a ton of data out there. And so that is the primary one that comes to mind. I actually think most life science vendors are kind of behind when it comes to really effectively integrating life science software vendors are really behind when it comes to integrating effective software tools. Like I had someone at a 300-person biotech tell me, oh, I like Cortellis rolled out their AI and we hadn't bought any other AI products because they've been telling us for years that they were going to roll it out. And so we were just waiting. And then they finally rolled it out and she's like, it just doesn't work. I ask questions and like I just get garbage back. So I'm still using ChatGPT. And so now they're going and looking for potential solutions. But I think for things that like help drugs come to market, for things that regulatory and clinical teams tend to use, they're quite behind the curve. I would say the scientists and for literature review is really where the best AI tools are today.
Okay, the questions are really rolling in now, and we have about 5 more minutes. So, can you speak about ROI on building these AI tools? It feels like AI solutions are really expensive compared to rule-based. So the question are they worth it?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think part of that is life sciences generally just has more expensive software in my experience than any other industry, including banks. I would add, but there are some folks out there that want to sort of price these things in a more reasonable way. Like we start off at $400 per person per month, for example, and there's others in similar ballparks, especially on the pure medical device side. The I think on the expense, even if they're not like, even if they start off dramatically higher, the main thing to trade it off with is like, what would it cost if you do, what would it cost to be able to hire folks to help do that work? And oftentimes the answer is probably going to be you should just hire it because it's worth it, and one person could handle all of this stuff and do other things. But if you compare it against salaries, is when a lot of that ROI, or like five people in finance, will start to make sense. The It's hard to comment on that in the abstract though, honestly. I can imagine lots of use cases where you're totally right, it's too expensive, doesn't make any sense. But I can imagine a lot of cases like in regulatory intelligence products where it is more than worth it because you don't want to be surprised. And today you are often last minute surprised, or you don't want to be giving incomplete information. And so let's pay the low to mid six figures to get something that's really, really good if you're a larger company. And the up tens of thousands or low six figures if you're a small.
That's where, as you know, we could talk direct costs, like if replacing a salary or time. But there's a lot, the opportunity costs are huge. With exactly that, you're de-risking, you're adding confidence to the decisions that are being made within that organization. And ideally, you're providing a tool that helps and enhances the jobs of the people using it. So there's also job satisfaction, and they're able to be more effective at what they're doing as well. So there's a lot of opportunity costs when we think about it too, which are difficult to factor in, on especially if you're making a justification.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Do you think CMC can be automated using AI? And if so, how?
Shannon, I'll let you start on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be tools that help that, but I don't think the whole thing can be automated, because, and this is kind of a classic, so I'm not going to get on a soapbox here, telling myself this, but so my background's in human factors and cognitive systems, and so what that is studying how people and technology work. And so we've been introducing automation into our processes as long as we've been making tools. And we've learned over and over and over again how when we hand over too much and the wrong type of work, things can go wrong. 3 Mile Island, Air Max 800, right? All of these incidences that we see when we kind of isolate the human from the automation. And so I'll stop there. But when we talk about CMC, that is that it's a whole process. There's a lot of pieces, and it's all coming together, and it requires the human expertise and the tools that those humans can use to bring together creative and efficient solutions. So I don't know that the whole thing could be automated. I think there can definitely be tools that will help that process. But
I think it'll be made a lot more productive. I agree. Unlikely to be automated.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Next question, and probably the final. Do you include other countries' regulator decisions? If so, which countries?
Yes, in Rhizome, we have the UK, we have the EU, we have East Asia, Japan, South Korea, and China. We have Australia and Canada as well, and we're adding new countries all the time. We'll probably have about 20 to 25 countries later this year. Yeah.
I'm so excited about this too, not only from the standpoint of being able to get that insight. And I think actually that insight is super valuable for risk management and product management, post-market data. But I lead a research center with students from around the world that are studying quality science and regulatory. And I actually make sure they have access to Rhizome because of this, so that we can dive in and as we're looking at different issues and regulatory questions, we can look at what's happening in Australia or Canada or Europe, and have access to that information too. So,
Well,
for the clients, I like for the students. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were finished. Thank you, Chetan and Shannon. We truly appreciate it. That was extremely informative. If we did not get to your question, we will circle back after the program. Visit www.bionj.org for details and our full calendar of programs. Thanks again to Rhizome AI for partnering with us on today's webinar. If you aren't a BioNJ member yet, please contact me or my fabulous colleague, Danielle Campay, to learn about the many benefits of membership. Our contact information is up on the screen. And before you sign off, please take a second to scan the QR code on the screen to take our short program evaluation. Your feedback is very important to us, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.